a lot of the time it's easy to talk about what the convention needs to do and what those people need to do, as opposed to, okay, what about me? You know, because I think of myself as a reasonably open-minded and good human being, mostly. And then years ago, I remember going home and actually looking at my bookshelves and deliberately looking at who have I been reading and thinking I'm so open-minded and realizing, oh, I read mostly white people. I should do something. And it was never a deliberate, conscious thing that I would go into the bookstore, where are the white people books? It's just, that was what I had grown up with. That's what I got used to. So having to deliberately reach outside of my comfort zone and discovered, damn, there are a lot of amazing writers I've been missing out on. And again, we don't want to look at ourselves that way because we don't want to think, oh, I'm a horrible, racist, bad person, right? But forget that. Whether I'm a horrible person or not, I'm missing out. Mm-hmm. You know, when Sabrina talks about, you know, bringing in more women authors to talk on panels, I want that because I've been missing out on that. Mm-hmm. You know, whether I realize it or not, the conventions, the organizations, the festivals, they've been cheating me, and I've been cheating myself in that way.
Yeah. Representation is a conscious act. It's not something that will just sort of happen. And representation is a conscious act in many ways. It requires people who are in marginalized groups to basically put themselves up front and be targets for criticism and everything else, because that's what happens the first time someone from a marginalized group comes forward and demands to participate. But it is also a conscious act on the part of the folks who are basically the default, the people who are straight, the people who are white, the people who are male, that they make the effort to go outside of their comfort zones, as Jim mentions. And that requires not just an individual effort, but it also requires an effort with the organizations that also just have that have been around. Organizations do need to have representation, do need to seek out representation. And again, this is very difficult because there is inertia, which is, we've done this way for 50 years and it's always worked for us before. But also, I always say to people, there's a difference between being racist or being sexist or being homophobic or transphobic and being a racist or a sexist. You get a certain amount of racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia in your society, and you swim in that water and you don't recognize that it's there until you actually make the effort to do it. And so you can be racist without actively saying, I hate any particular group, or you can be sexist without saying, but I love women, I'm married to one, or you can be transphobic without saying, I don't have any problems with people who are trans, because just the world that you live in. So again, it requires conscious effort, starting with you and moving up to the larger groups and entities.
Et mettre en place, par exemple, un système strictement paritaire, ça permettrait, vous pensez, d'éviter ce genre de représentation très, très limitée de la population?
I don't know necessarily that you have to have a strict representation system, and often it's very difficult to do that at the very beginning because marginalized people can be rightly suspicious of your intent. It's like, oh, we have a black person now, so we're fine. But what it takes is less of an issue of strict quotas. Although you do need to have representation, you need to have something that looks like the world that you live in, but you need to make sure that who you have representing has power, has the ability to contribute with decision-making processes. Ultimately, you do basically want to have your organizations and your groups and your communities to have the representation in power that they have in the world. But there's a lot of work between that step and the first steps, I think, a lot of times.
Je pense qu'aussi, il y a aussi un travail éditorial énorme à faire, c'est-à-dire que le sujet et les participantes et les participants au sujet doivent être envisagés de la même manière, c'est-à-dire qu'on ne peut pas envisager de parler de choses sans avoir les bonnes personnes pour en parler. Et si la diversité de la littérature et de la création en général s'ouvre au monde, il n'y a aucune raison que les sujets ne s'ouvrent pas aux acteurs et aux actrices qui le font. Et le problème, c'est qu'on a une dichotomie là-dessus, c'est-à-dire qu'on peut avoir une injonction à avoir des quotas et avoir des trucs paritaires, machin, mais qu'on fout des gens sur des mauvais sujets ou qu'on met des gens qui n'ont pas de rapport sur des sujets comme ça. Et on se confronte tout le temps à ça. Et je veux pas dire, et surtout ne vous comprenez pas, je veux pas dire que c'est conscient de la part des organisateurs et des organisatrices de faire des choses comme ça, mais c'est que souvent il y a tellement de facteurs qui rentrent en jeu, c'est un peu comme Tetris, quoi. On est obligé de faire rentrer les gens dans mais en même temps on loupe des trucs d'une évidence incroyable, quoi. Des gens qui vont se retrouver à parler de sujets qui concernent d'autres personnes visibles dans le milieu qui pourraient en parler et qui ne sont pas là pour en parler et qui sont parfois dans le sujet, dans le public, qui devrait être sur scène pour en parler. Et on a ce gros souci-là de représentation, quoi. C'est de conformer finalement, de réussir à adapter le contenu éditorial, le propos éditorial avec la population qui crée et qui stimule ce contenu éditorial. Et je pense que là, le travail n'est pas fait encore, parce que c'est très compliqué pour plein de raisons. Alors ça n'excuse pas forcément, mais je pense qu'on pourrait commencer aussi par là, c'est-à-dire avoir une discussion un peu plus active et interactive entre les organisateurs, les acteurs et les actrices des conventions et des festivals.
And building off of what you were saying, you introduced John and me both as people who blog and talk about issues of harassment, of inclusion, of diversity, and eventually it starts to feel a little awkward that who are the big American bloggers talking about diversity? Oh, they're these white dudes.
Right.
And so part of the responsibility, part of the job is, okay, for better or worse, John and I both have decent-sized platforms online. John's is bigger than mine, but we won't go into that. Great. So now let's use that platform to say, okay, you've been reading along with me, now go read this person. Now I'm going to link you to Sabrina's blog because she's saying something really important here. Go listen to other people. Go read to other people.
Yeah.
We have the ability to put more of a spotlight and to use our platform to spotlight and highlight people who have been underrepresented.
Sure. Well, and also the thing that you also understand when you are in a position that Jim and I are, is that you will occasionally show your ass. And what that means is, despite however you want to be inclusive, however you want to participate, however you want to champion things, ultimately there are things that are literally outside of your experience, so you're going to get them wrong. So by necessity, I mean, sooner or later, I screw up. When I screw up, you apologize and you move forward, but you also recognize that part of your responsibility is as Jim says, to tell people these are the limits of what I know and what I can do, and these are the people that you need to be looking at and seeing and listening to, because they speak directly to this sort of experience. And so a lot of what I do, both on the blog and also on my Twitter, where I have about 150,000 followers, so a reasonably sized platform there, is I'm linking to people who are not only talking about diversity, but are living the issues of diversity themselves, because they can speak to it in a way I simply cannot, and I just point people to it and say, go there. And take a look at it. Now, again, there's a selection process there. My own biases are still in play, but you do it. But you do what you can do. But ultimately, again, the goal is not to have to be the filter. The goal is to get people to go to these people, these sources, these people participating in the community directly, so they don't have to have the white man filter.